So, good morning and welcome to another interview. I am so pleased to have Charlie Curry saying yes, he would participate in this interview. I have known Charlie and his lovely wife, Penn, ever since basically we moved to Minnesota. They, as long as I knew them, lived in Apple Valley, and last fall decided that it was kind of important to move close to kids and grandkids. And those of us that have kids and grandkids know how important that is. But fortunately, through the invention of Zoom, we're able to continue, still have an interview. So thank you very much, Charlie, who actually holds the office of Evangelist in our Community of Christ Church. So we're just going to go through the questions that I am asking each person that's willing to do these interviews. So the first question, tell me about your religious upbringing. I have a feeling it's very spectacular.
Yeah. Right. Well, it's certainly long. It goes back on my mother's side. It goes back at least two or three generations. I think if you look at the Hyde line, with my mom's maiden name was Hyde, that goes back to at least her grandparents, and my step grandma goes back also that far. On my dad's side, my dad's mother goes back a couple of generations, at least to the 1880s. My granddad was a Presbyterian until he got brought into the church by Gomer Griffiths in the 1910s or thereabouts. So I go back. So there's no part of me that has ever been not RLDS or Community of Christ. Um, the the earliest thing I remember, maybe when my dad and mom moved to Madison, Wisconsin, it was like right after World War II, about 1947. I would have been 2 or 3, and they there was no housing at all. So even every trailer in the city was part of student housing. And my dad and mom didn't have any place, and the university called up and said, "Well, we have this old canvas Quonset hut. Would you like to have that?" And they said, "Yeah." And so my very, very earliest memory is of building the platform that the Quonset hut went on, and I suspect those were church guys. I don't know for sure, but not being old enough to ask them.
And not being old enough to help build.
Well, that's right. Yeah, I kind of watched it. All I remember is that it was a sunny day, and one of them picked me up and threw me in the air and caught me. That's the entire memory. But my earliest church days were in the oldest Madison church, which has been sold and resold a couple of times. It's still around, but it's one of those old white clapboard kind of things with way too many steps to get into it, and a furnace in the basement and that kind of stuff. And I remember that from very early days. In terms of the rest of the upbringing, was the usual things: Sunday school, church, etc., all the activities. Um, I remember having to sit in prayer services and think people were awfully weepy. And I remember early trips to Independence Auditorium before they put carpet in the auditorium, and how it seemed very loud.
Yes.
All sat on park benches that have been brought into the bare concrete. But since my grandfather and grandmother Curry lived in Independence and had been part of the church since God was a child, I think we were always going to the auditorium to see some of Grandpa's old friends and so forth. So it was the upbringing. It was always a presence in my life, both Independence and then wherever else we were. Um, in terms of the um, in terms of the religious training or religious uh, processes, it was the best I can say it was sort of like the way my mother um, introduced us or got us involved with Santa Claus. That for a lot of kids, finding out that Santa Claus wasn't real was a big deal and was very traumatic. With the way Mom did it, one year she, you guys like to help Santa, and so we did, and we thought it was lots of fun. And then we got old enough to recognize the handwriting, and then we decided, we turned it into a much more, and so it was just a gradual unfolding. Um, and so there was no trauma, this sort of gradual acquaintance with what the real purpose of a lot of Christmas is about. Um, and so that's kind of the way I've proceeded with all of my life, is this gradual unfolding. Um, and it's still ongoing. I remember, I think it was in Madison, we went to some other church for some meeting or another, and there was a bell tower. It was a fairly new building, and the bell tower had no bells in it. And there was a banner underneath the bell tower that said, "The bells are not there until Christ returns." So it was an on purpose kind of thing. And I thought, that's kind of it. Things are not finished until they're finished. And that's kind of my current state of things as well.
Well, I had no doubt that you were richly immersed in the RLDS traditions. And I just have to say one thing, well, maybe more than one, but when you talk about your mother and your father, but especially as I think about your mother, both of these people, I'm so sorry I don't have a recorded interview with them, because two of the most amazing people, certainly from the outside, and I think from the inside, because you have always spoken so wonderfully about them. And I just, I just wish that we could have had a little bit more of their story as well. But you're telling it very well, as much as you can. So thank you. You also, I'm just going to give you the opportunity, because you also had a Curry who was very involved in church leadership at the
Right.
headquarters level. Can you
Yep.
just tell me about that? That's a different question, but since you don't need to answer the second question of what was your introduction to the church, this will be a chance for you to introduce the listeners to
Sure.
your
That
history.
my granddad was LFP, which and this is the guy who had been a Presbyterian when he was growing up, but when he got baptized into the church, he brought in the whole family. So, um, and my great uncle Earl, was kind of the mystic of the family. He got very much associated with the Kirtland Temple, um, and more people remember him than remember my granddad. Um, Granddad was the bishop at the time that the church was in terrible financial shape. The the creditors were approaching the door with locks, to, and Grandpa basically talked him out of it and helped put the church on a better financial footing. Um, the his um, um, he wasn't treated well by the church, and um, he didn't leave a legacy that people remember because he was never um, the the loud voice, and he was never attracting himself as the center of attention. If you ever see a picture of him in a group, he was not very tall, but you never saw him in the front row. You never saw him in the center of anything. And so he would stand sort of in the back off to the side because he did his work quietly and effectively. And I think as a result, people don't really, unless they knew him, they don't really understand very much about him. He was the first person to be in the presiding bishopric office, the presiding bishop office, and also in the first presidency. And then and so he followed a pattern very similar to Stacey Cram. Um, and so that's, I actually wrote a paper that I did my thesis for graduate school for seminary on Grandpa and the financial crisis of the church. I got it published in the John Whitmer journal. So there's something, but he doesn't get spoken about very often. He's kind of the quiet glue that held the thing together.
Absolutely. And I'm not sure why I was aware of his really saving the church in when it was in such dire straits. And like you say, it sounds very similar to what Stacy has experienced and
Oh
is
yeah.
experiencing. So all of that. Thank you for that little divergent. And one of these days, I want to hear more about Earl and the Kirtland Temple as well. But I'm going to move on right now to one or two special testimonies or experiences that you have that stand out. I know you've had enough, we could write volumes, but God's blessings or guidance, if you could share with that.
Sure. Um, there are so many, and I think some of the early ones are not that important because of the this sort of idea of the gradual unfolding. So early on, I began to think that there were two churches that we had. We had the church in the Doctrine and Covenants, which was open and involving and expansive. And then we had the Church of the People in Independence, which was not. Um, and so it got me thinking about the history of the church, and the folks that packed up and went west were all very much tuned to the leadership that went west to Utah. The people that stayed around in Wisconsin and Missouri and Illinois were all the people that said no all the time. And so that contentious bunch ended up in Missouri mostly. And so I think, and so I, as a young man, was really quite frustrated with the church in terms of it not moving into it wasn't aligning itself with its own doctrine and covenants. Um, if I this is the testimony comes then out of more recent stuff. Section 161 for me, it was a seminal moment in the church as we talked about and it was done in very poetic language about the oneness of creation and the overall arching love and so forth. That was to me a seminal moment. Um, the the interfaith work, which is a part of this unfolding stuff, but so the interfaith work, and I get constant reminders that the interfaith direction is the correct uh, direction, that God is the God of all, period, and that gets reaffirmed on a basically every time I deal with people who are um, uh, serious about religion. And what I mean by serious is they're serious about what it means to the daily life, not what it means about particular points of theology, which are kind of contentious to say the least. So this gradual unfolding to me is this sort of idea that I've been fairly well blessed all my life, and I don't have to worry about that stuff. I'm not looking for magical events and being knocked over the head, but this sense of walking with is just really strong.
And I can testify that you have, and you continue to walk with. And those words, I was going to interrupt you and say, walking with, and they came out of your mouth. And that is, and like you say, when you find people of different faiths who are walking with their faith as well, that is what we're looking for. Absolutely. Do you, I have my Doctrine and Covenants down below, but I didn't want to bend over and try to look up section 161, but I'm going to definitely read it when we're done here. And I'll encourage anybody that's watching this recording to do the same.
Yeah, and the other one that was sort of like a great aha, and I don't think it really belongs to the community of Christ alone, and that is in 163, there's a section that it says basically God gets really mad when we misuse scripture. And there's a point about that.
Yes.
That's a heavy paraphrase, by the way. That isn't
Well,
worded, but it's really the attitude. And I think those are pivotal to the direction of the church now.
yes. And like you say, they are contentious and belong to all faiths. That same warning, especially in this day and age.
Yes.
So what do you think is important for Community of Christ to do now or in the future or at all?
Well, I think one of the things we need to do is have faith that the work will continue no matter what. So I think we need to accept the fact that our particular denomination as a 501c3 may or may not exist in the future, but it doesn't matter because God's will be done and will be continued to be done. So I think we need to have a little more confidence than we perhaps do right now. I do think that we could be a lot better about preaching and acting out Luke 4. The when Jesus went to the synagogue and he said, "Listen, guys, here it is. Feed the hungry, clothe the naked, visit the those in prison, visit the sick." In other words, take care of each other. And everybody thought he was doing really well until he said, "And that applies to you too." And then it kind of hit the fan. So I'm thinking that we need to be more along those lines, and we need to say that applies not only to Sunday morning and Wednesday evening and to our private lives, but it also applies to our public intercourse, our public policy making, and our conversations. And that, I think, right today is really that's difficult because in my estimation, the church has been sidelined. Real small c real church has been
Mhm.
sidelined by the rhetoric of a very loud and nasty few, and I think we need to stand against that. Um, I also think that anything that we do that's talking about um, all means all is is just really important. That it includes everybody. All people are God's children. All people of
Yes.
whatever ethnicity, and even conservative Christians are God's children. That I have to remind myself of from time to time, because I want to just yell at them because of the stuff they're saying and doing. But but that's, I think, to me, the whole overall idea of the gospel is that all means all, and we all need to take care of each other. We all need to appreciate each other and support each other. Period. Dead stop.
Exactly. Love your neighbor. There were no exceptions.
That's right. Yep.
Um, and this next question probably falls into what you were saying, and maybe you want to expand more or not. But how do you think we can share the gospel with others?
I I really think, we miss something by trying to reduce it to what we say.
Hmm.
It isn't really a matter
Yep.
to me of standing on the street corner and saying, "Here's this pamphlet, won't you come to church?" I think that's not it. I do think we have to live lives that are worthy of people asking questions. And when people ask questions, then I think we share. But in the meantime, we got work to do, and it doesn't matter. I mean, one of the things that it that I have some Jewish friends, and one of the things that they say is that if you're Jewish, it doesn't matter what you think; it only matters what you do. And the way I read the gospel, that's it. That it doesn't matter. And our earliest, I think one of Joseph Smith's early um, inspirations was the Book of James. And the Book of James basically
Mhm.
said, "Hey, you folks, if you don't," and I may be mixing up which chapter and so forth, but it says, if you talk about this and you don't do something, the truth is not in you. And I think that is so true. It's not a matter of separating works and spirit. It is a matter of following whatever you say through with actions that are consistent with that. So I think that's the thing that seems to me to be most important, is that we are found as I'm don't quote me on which section, but the Doctrine and Covenant says we should be found in the forefront of those organizations that are doing good things.
Our works spiritually, whatever we're doing, have that be
Yep.
part of it. And this day and age, the rhetoric that people are professing to be Christians, but they're certainly not acting as Jesus followers. And
Yep.
that's really frustrating.
Amen.
But I'm talking to the choir, right?
Yep.
Okay, so my next question is, who do you feel has been most influential from the
Mm,
church in your life? And you
mm.
probably have an entire garden of people.
Yeah, I'm afraid I do. Besides my grandparents and my parents and my whole family, um, that some of the early people, one of them was Dwayne Cooey, who was an apostle, and he knew granddad, and so um, he, I can't I when I was just a little kid, Dwayne Cooey was what was to me was really big, I mean, he was taller than my granddad, who wasn't very big, but granddad was kind of granddad sized.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
Cooey seemed to be about another
yeah.
foot and a half taller. Yeah. But when we would go over to the uh, auditorium uh, for Grandpa to do whatever it is that he was doing over there, if Cooey came around, he came down to our level. And as far as we were concerned, we were the only people in the entire world. He
Wow.
focused his attention on us. And when I found more out about his background, it was really, he was sort of considered one of the radicals of that day. And it was because he was very much interested in education as the way forward for the church. Um, so Cooey's uh, language and writing. Um, uh, Cole was another one whose writing was important. If it hadn't been for people like Cooey and Cole, maybe Draper, I don't think I would have stayed with the church because there was this area, there was this group of people that were opposed to any change. And
Hmm.
people like Cooey and Draper and Cole said, no, this is that we need to accept what we have in our doctrine and covenants and move forward. And so it is through their stuff that kept me in the church. People like Jeffrey Spencer um, were very important to me. And then there was a group of people in that were in the region. Dave Brock, Bob Kaiser, Jim Hanna, um, Phil Robinson, or Phil Caswell and Ken Robinson. Those folks really nurtured me in my ministry, and in so they are uh, pretty heavy influences as well. And then, of course, there's my dad, who basically holds up the idea of caring for people, and my mom, who's basically saying, get stuff done.
Well, it again, you had a wonderful background, a foundation to stand on and move forward. That's for sure. Um, I guess the last question is, what do you think is most important for others to know about you? Or maybe something different, or maybe not.
Well, I don't know. When I was doing seminary, I ran across the writings of a guy named John Cobb, who is uh, uh, it's a theology that is pretty disruptive.
Can you
Uh,
spell his last name for me?
Cobb.
Okay, Cobb.
If
Okay.
he's still around, he's in his 90s by now.
Okay.
So he's ancient. Um, One of the things he said, and I think this is something we need to consider. I wouldn't, and it's something that I think about from time to time. One of the things he said was he did a lot of work with Hindu and Christian thought and some stuff like that. So he's like a theologian's theologian,
Mm.
and um, he said, "I will follow Christ, even if it means giving up Christ." Which
Say that one more time because I got a little glitch.
yeah, I will follow Christ, even if it means giving up Christ, which
Oh.
which I think is a really important thing. And I think what he's saying is that if the trappings get in the way of service, then I will give up the trappings. And he also was one who was very serious about all means all. So if there's anything that somebody ought to know about me, is that anything that I hold about the church, anything I hold about philosophy in general, is held lightly. And if I need to give it up, I think I would. I'm happy to give it up. I don't. How do I say this? I don't hold it. I don't want to hang on to stuff that does gets in the way of all means all and everything, of that nature. Um, if if people don't know, that means that I'm very seriously interested in interfaith stuff. I still have connections to the Minnesota Multi Faith Network,
I'm sure
and
they didn't want to let you go.
that's right. There's a very long ankle bracelet. Um,
Well, that's
yeah,
something more of us probably should look into as well. And but if nothing else, the behavior that we need to exhibit, the examples that we need to live out, as you were saying.
yeah, and I think that's we get it when we get all these people in the room together, and they are talking with each other and relating to each other on the important stuff. A lot of the things that keep us apart just kind of fall away. And so that's kind of what my experience has been in the last several years, and I hope I can continue. It's getting, we are still trying to get our footings in asaning, and we've learned how to walk up and down the hills.
Oh, I did not realize it was a hilly place, but
Oh, it makes San Francisco look kind of flat and
oh
some, but
wow.
it's
Wow.
there's a lot of semi-mountainous stuff, and the roads are going up and down. I don't think cars last as long here as they do in other places.
So your walks are not quite like they were at the Minnesota Zoo that you took almost every day, I think. Pretty
No,
flat.
yeah, what were considered hills there wouldn't even be a bump here. And
Oh
so
gosh.
they're pretty serious hills, but we like it a lot, and we're just trying to make our way and get our connections and see what's what.
Well, as I said earlier, I'm grateful that we have the Zoom opportunities to be able to still reach out and see one another and have this opportunity for the interview. So thank you so very much. And I will let you know and others once we get these all landed on a certain place, and we'll let everybody know where they can see them. So thank you again. I
So
appreciate it so much.
it's been a pleasure.